Greetings and salutations. Welcome to this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Before we begin, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share the show with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. My guest today is a playwright, director, and actor, and was the literary manager for the Open Fist Theater Company in Los Angeles from 1999 to 2006. He was writer and director, editor for Nickelodeon and PBS on shows such as Doug Arthur, for which he received 3 Emmy Awards, Martha Speaks, Curious George, and most recently Hop. His play Amerika, or The Man Who Disappeared, opened October 20th and runs through November 22nd in the Outwater Village Theater in Los Angeles, California. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dietrich Smith. Thanks for coming on.
Hello, yes. Yes, here I am.
So, I think there's so many ways I want to approach this, and I don't know which one to. Let's start from literary manager for the Open Fist, because that obviously is somewhat of a gateway into your realm of playwriting.
Okay. Yeah.
Right, if I'm not mistaken, because you're receiving submissions, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so, tell me about that experience. What are you garnering from that? And I don't mean like in the gateway to your playwriting, but more like, what are you learning? You're reading plays, you're getting these submissions. I'm assuming it's from aspects of beginner to established, people that may not have any knowledge of playwriting.
Right.
All the way to maybe somebody who's like off Broadway, or even Broadway for that aspect. So let's start there and go and dive into things from there.
Okay, well, as literary manager, I when I joined Open Fist, I was about 40. I didn't even start acting till 40. I sort of made a huge switch from television to theater.
We'll get into that too.
I was a theater junkie, so I had a huge knowledge already of theater kind of literature, because I really loved it. I mean, I went to a lot of plays, I read a lot of plays.
Sure.
And so I came to literary manager kind of with a trunk of stuff that I kind of already wanted to do, this being one of them, actually. And so I was reading plays. There were submissions, mostly at that point. Open Fist, it was a membership company, so they're mostly from beginners. When established playwrights gave us plays, that was usually through their conduit. It was a different conduit. It wasn't like an open submission. It was we were actually considering they're doing the play. What did I learn from that? I don't know that I learned particularly as far as playwriting went, because I had been a writer for, already for many, many years. I think I don't know that I would say I learned anything about playwriting from being literary manager. I was pretty much, what I was really doing was programming seasons for Open Fist. Sure. I was kind of using my own sensibility to kind of guide us to what kind of plays we did. And I tended to gravitate toward more novelistic kind of stuff, things that had a little more depth and length. And so we started doing more, I would say, epic kind of pieces. But that was really where my focus was. I'm trying to think, I don't think in the 7 years we were there, we actually did not on a main stage ever, an open submission where somebody submitted a play. Okay. We didn't have a lot of people reading plays, so I was reading most of them. I didn't have a lot of time to do that, so it was really that was kind of what I was doing as literary manager more than anything. I would say programming more than doing a massive reading of a lot of submissions. Sure,
and maybe learning is not the correct phrase. It's more like noticing trends. Because I know that you're gonna get different levels of experience, and what were some of the things like? Oh boy, like were there habits or trends or things that came through, that were like, oh boy, wow, who?
It's hard to remember, to be honest. It's so long ago to be specific about specific submissions. I will say, one of the things I noticed in a lot of people who submit plays is they didn't have a good grasp of narrative. They didn't have a good grasp of what the engine of a story is. So you would get often plays that were very sort of dialogue heavy and discursive, but they didn't seem to move forward. They were sort of, you got the feeling like this is this is how me and my friends talk, or this is how my family talks, and they're sort of enjoying that process. And that's a lot of theater is dialogue. There's no question. Right. But I found that what was often missing, for the most part, was that kind of narrative drive. And I'll confess that that's also my preference. I'm heavy on narrative. I'm heavy on things having a forward movement and momentum. So, but I did find in general those were the sorts of plays that were submitted. It was Los Angeles. I found a preponderance of plays about making it in the movie industry, and the travails of being an actor. And I will say I had less of an interest in those. I really wanted to get beyond that sort of local kind of I don't know, sort of inbred kind of thing with Los Angeles theater. I was really wanting to break out of that small theater thing and to do. We were going to be a big theater doing big sort of epic kind of more ambitious work. So, But that was, I would say, in general, when I had open submissions back then, that's what they tended to be. I don't remember, to be quite honest, any open submissions really standing out to me and saying, "Oh, we've got to do this." Usually the ones we wanted to do was a director brought something, or somebody who we knew brought plays that they were interested in, or they had somebody who was a writer who was starting out, and usually those were a little more evolved. Usually they had gone through a playwriting program, or they had a little bit of experience. But that was in general, as a literary manager, that's what I found in terms of just culling the things that were coming over the transom.
Sure, and I do want to unpack and expand on what you mentioned in that regard, as far as some of the submissions that you had, and being dialogue heavy but not expanding on narrative. So, what is? I don't want to say how do you teach that, or what does that look like, but like what in your experience, better yet, from your background, how do you what do you expect is probably a better way, like, if it's like, because again, like, I agree with you, sometimes the dialogue is more exposition, more explaining it, or again, here we go. We've gotten to this point again where it's telling, not showing.
It just tends to be going in circles, or it's just not going anywhere. Sometimes it's interesting dialogue, sometimes it's not. And there's some great playwrights who really they're pretty dialogue centric. Again, I don't want to blast a dialogue heavy. I mean, that's what theater's about. It's
100%.
But I started writing screenplays in the 80s, and then I became my first job on Doug was as a story editor, was not as a writer. So I was actually going through people's scripts and structuring them. That was kind of my strength, was structuring things and restructuring. And really, if you want to say on a most basic level, it's having a beginning, middle, and end. That's really basic. Where is your story going? How is that story developing? Whose story is it? What is their goal? What are they trying to accomplish? What's stopping them from accomplishing that? Or are there multiple people whose story it is? In which case, what are their goals? It's fairly basic, and in some ways, it's not that different from when you're an actor and your whole, your goal is, what's your intention? Why are you doing this? So it's a pretty basic thing, but you have to arrive somewhere. That has to develop. There's obstacles that get in your way. You're circumventing. You're dealing with those obstacles. Then where does that go? Where does you end up at the end of this piece? By you, I mean the main character, or the characters, or the entity. But I think it's that basic, and I think that's what narrative is. There can be many incidents that get in the way, and you can have a lot of plot where there's a lot of reversals where things are switching, or it may take a slower pace, and things are, either one is fine. But I find that it needs to have a drive, it needs to have a motor, it needs to have a reason for me to want to get to the end. I need to be in a form of suspense to know, why am I following this person's journey? And when I'm talking about dialogue discursive plays, sometimes what I would find is I didn't know whose story it was. I didn't know what it was about, really. I found it was just sort of a sort of amorphous sort of thing happening. And so it didn't have a motor, and so there wasn't really a reason for me to keep reading. I guess if you're talking about plays that don't work and the ones I was reading that weren't necessarily working, that would be the thing. But again, I have a really strong preference for narrative. I like narrative. My scripts were overly plot heavy for television. This play has a lot of plot in it, and the downside of that is you end up with length. You know.
We're gonna get into that.
Oh yeah, I know. But that's basically it. Where yeah.
Sure, fair enough. I'm going to do something, and it might throw you off, but you've got this handsome mug that's going on right now, and my camera angle is blocking it, so I'm going to move your mic down.
Oh, okay. You're going to move it, or
I'm going to move it just so I can see it.
Okay.
There we go. That's my fault. No worries. All right, here we go. All right, so I'm hoping that's not going to throw you off.
That gives me a chance to drink
Good.
water.
Drink water. This is the fun of everything. There's no. It's a conversation, like you said. Oh gosh, so I want. This is something we haven't explored. Again, every episode is there's always something that we haven't approached, and you brought something up that we really haven't established yet, and that's whose story is it?
Yeah.
How do you establish that, or when do you when do you determine that?
I honestly don't know how to answer that question.
That's fine. That's what we're going to do together. Maybe is like, does it happen at the beginning? Have you already established that, or does it happen in the middle of writing? I don't know. In this again because.
Well, I can speak for myself. Usually, when I've written something, I usually know pretty much up front whose story it is. There have been times when I've kind of wandered around, and you're sort of just dealing with a situation. There's a theme you're sort of interested in, but you're not quite sure who or what it is, and you just sort of find it by groping, by kind of writing, and it starts to make itself apparent. But I think if you have a story, it should be pretty clear to you whose story it is. How do you determine that? I don't know. For me, that's usually an impetus. It's usually right up front. I have a person who's exploring an issue or a problem in their life, or yes, and it's usually fairly apparent to me as a writer. So I can't speak for other writers with their processes in terms of finding it, but that's usually almost a first step for me.
You said that there's themes that you're maybe interested in exploring. So do you know going in when you start writing that this is the theme that I want to explore, or do you start writing and think, okay, I'm seeing a trend?
Oh no, I'm very definitely, there's a theme I want to explore, there's an issue I want to explore, there's something I want to, there's something I want to satirize, or there's something I want to go into. Yeah, that's usually, I'm usually not groping for that. I'm not, they're obviously the Pinter sort of writers who they just started almost free associating, and it evolves into something, and they're sort of figuring it out. So I can't speak for those, but for me, it's usually I'm coming from a very definite place at the beginning.
So on that note, because you kind of brought into that, they just kind of freestyle. How much pre-planning, for lack of a better phrase, are you doing? Do you have an outline? What's your approach when you to the process when you first start out and say this is, whether that's from animation point of view or in this aspect playwriting, because I'm sure that there's similarities.
Well, again, the only play I've written is an adaptation, so I was coming from a book that already existed. Like I didn't have to go through all those steps; it was there on the page. As a screenwriter, as a television writer, I kind of knew the theme and the sort of story I wanted to tell. It almost usually would come from, what if this person was doing this and it led to that? That would almost be the impetus. But then my process was always to do a lot of notes, just take a legal pad and just have ideas for scenes, ideas for moments, ideas for. I tended to write that way as opposed to starting just from writing it from scratch. That usually then a kind of outline takes shape from that. You start to see what your basic structure is going to be.
Sure.
I never wanted to get too ironclad on a structure. I had a hard time writing really, really specific treatments, which sometimes you have to do, and you certainly did in television. You had to write an outline that was submitted before the script, and I really didn't like doing that because I didn't like locking myself in.
Sure.
So in fact, in television, what I do is my outlines would be way overscaled. There would be so many ideas and so it was just basically tons of possibilities, but you could see a basic structure. The people who were reading it could see what its general structure was. That way I didn't lock myself in, because usually then my scripts would diverge from the outline quite a bit, but they would keep generally to the structure of it. The end would pretty much be the same. Like, I knew where it was going. Occasionally it would change. Sometimes I would get through writing and realize, oh, there's a better place where this would go. But I definitely need a sort of, I need a little bit of a map of the journey. When I've tried to write in the past and I'll just try to write from scratch. I'll just start a scene and see where it goes. You get it. I would find I would go off on so many tangents that I'd sort of lose the thread, and then I'd often have to go back and rethink it. There's some who are really good at that. I'm not. I'm very much of a structure person, so I really need to kind of know what the map is. That said, again, I don't want to lock myself down, because you're always inspired when you're writing. There's always a new idea that hits you that doesn't necessarily fit that map, and so you need to leave yourself open to changing it all if that happens.
Completely understand. So in that regard, how obviously your experience is applying these things to even an adaptation, even though you know what the story is, and I'm sure that there's other ideas in this aspect, because we're not looking at something historical or true life. We're looking at something that's already established, but I can't help but think that there might be some creative license that pops into your head.
Well,
so,
sure, yeah.
Right. So how does that mapping come into play, and how does that experience that you came from applying to this adaptation that you're approaching now? That's a lot, so I apologize.
Well, this book, I mean, I'll tell you, I have a great deal of reverence for this book, and I wanted to adapt it since I first read it in 1990. That's a long time ago.
Sure.
So I was less wanting to be loosey-goosey with this thing and make it a template for my own statement. I wanted to tell the story that Kafka told in his book, and I wanted to be as faithful to what I thought he was doing as I, of course, there's no way to know for sure, particularly as it's unfinished. But I pretty much wanted to stick to the book and not play my own games with it. You have to, because of the book, there's whole sections where there's no dialogue, there's no, there's sort of vague, and you have to construct events that are happening in that
Sure.
space. But I was in general I pretty much stuck to his roadmap. He didn't finish the book, so I had to come up with an ending, and that I was trying to stay true to what I thought his themes were, and also based upon his other, his general, all his other stories and his general concerns, as well as mine, because there was something very personal about this. I loved the story, but I also identified with it in a personal way, and so I definitely brought some of my own personal obsessions into what I focused on. But in terms of structure, I was sticking to his book. It's really quite faithful to the book. Maybe overly so, because that's why it's long.
We'll get into that. So what was I don't want to say what's the catalyst. What was the draw? Why? And especially with something. How did you stumble? I don't want to say stumble. Like obviously,
I didn't stumble on it for sure.
I'm assuming. I don't know the history of this particular book. Kafka. That's
Well, let me tell you it's in the director's note in the program, so people can read it. But a guy who was my writing partner and very good friend and roommate in the '80s was a Kafka. He loved Kafka, and I remember 1980, which is the year we graduated college, and he gave me a copy of The Trial. And he said, "You've got to read this book. You'll love this book. You'll love this book." And I think we shared an interest in absurdist kind of stuff. Like John Guare was always been one of my favorite playwrights. So I always liked things with a sort of absurdist bent that were funny, but that had a dark edge to it. And so he said I would love it. I was reticent to read it. I had seen the Orson Welles movie of The Trial,
yep.
which is so visually astounding, but I found it depressing in a way that I didn't want to go into that world. I kept putting off reading the book. I would not read the book, and then we stopped writing together. He moved to New York, and I was here. And then I went to a show at MoCA of this painter. My mind is blanking. Tim Rollins. I can't remember his name now. He worked with a class of kids called KOS. He gave them an assignment where they were to read the last chapter of Amerika, where there's this troop of angels playing horns, and he said, I want you all to draw your own image of what the horn is. So these kids drew all these fantastical horns. Then he projected them on a big horizontal canvas and made a network of these horns against the canvas was basically pages from the Book of Amerika, from the original shotgun edition. And then they painted these beautiful gold sort of vines of all these horns. It was a beautiful show, and that made me want to read the book Amerika. So because I had all the Kafka books at home, I just didn't. So I read the book Amerika. I know this is a really long.
No, because I've got I'm jotting down questions because I'm fascinated by this. Keep going, please.
But it was art that made me want to read the book, and there were also illustrations on these pages that were behind that his tapestry of the pages, which I loved the illustrations. So I picked up the book and read it, and it's a fast read, and it was very funny, and it has a strong narrative, and it just took me along for a ride, and the humor was right up my alley. And I also love sort of road stories. I loved Kerouac, and I loved. There was something about the journey that he was taking that it was so, and it was very similar to stories and scripts that I'd written myself in terms of the story being told. I don't know, I just loved it, and I remember the dialogue was very funny on the page. And I remember thinking one day I want to adapt this. At that point, I was still screenwriting, and I thought I want to make a screenplay of it at some point, and because I just found the scenes themselves to be just so funny. So it was just always something I kept in my back pocket. I never really got around to it for a long time, but that's what, and then I read all of Kafka after that. I just kind of read it. I tended to do that with an author. I would just go, now I want to read all of it. And then I really liked all of it. I found that what I was daunted by was just, I don't know, a block in my brain. He's a very funny writer, and I think often when he's talked about it, it's just the darkness, which is there, but there's that little sense of that humor is, as dark as it is, sardonic, it threads its way through all of them. I mean, to me, that's what makes them so distinctive. So that was, but this particular story somehow, I like the energy of it. I like the youthful energy. It's one of the first things he wrote. He wrote at 29. I don't know.
He died young, right?
He died at 42. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. He got TB. Frank caught it because he was an insurance claims lawyer, investigator, and he caught it presumably from one of those cases. He had it for like 8 years or something. I mean, he had it a long time.
Sure. Yeah.
No, it's really tragic. So, but this was, he was kind of struggling. He was always trying to find time to write because, he lived at home with his parents for like into his 30s. He was always struggling to make a living. Like a lot of us, he wanted to be a writer, but he had to make a living, so he's squeezing the writing in between the cracks. He didn't really find himself until he wrote this story called The Judgment, which is sort of about retribution from his father. In a fantastical way. But he wrote that in a 24-hour period. He wrote it as an all-nighter, and he went, that's it, that's my style. And it really was. It unlocked something in him. And then he went right onto this. And he wrote The Amerika in like 3 months. He wrote it pretty quickly. And then he dropped it. He ran out of steam. He just sort of ran out of inspiration, and he didn't finish it. He just dropped it.
Where does Metamorphosis fall into this thing?
It's right after this. He wrote, because I think it was September he wrote The Judgment. I think this was written like September, October, November, or maybe October, November, I forget, December. And then he had the idea for Metamorphosis, and he wrote that pretty quickly in a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, right after this. And then he didn't write anything for a while. And then he really then didn't like Amerika much at all, and he would badmouth it, except for the first chapter he loved, and that was published in a book of his first book of stories, which I think was The Judgment, the first chapter of this called The Stoker, and Metamorphosis. That was his first sort of published book. And then 2 years later, beginning of World War II, he had an idea for how to finish it, and he wrote this other standalone chapter, which has no connection to the rest of the book, really. And there's nobody really knows how they were supposed to connect together. And he thought, oh, I've solved the problem. That's what I'm going to do. And then he ran out of steam on that too, and he didn't finish that chapter, and nobody knows where it was going to go. And he told his best friend Max Brod, who became the guy who published his books, he gave him contradictory senses of where it was going to go. One was a happy ending, no, one was a dark ending. I think he seemed to have a plan because he was trying to write a Dickens book. I think he had a plan that it would be like Dickens. It would kind of have an ending that would be a satisfying, happy ending. But I don't think that's where his sensibility goes. When you read Amerika, you can feel it. It's very rollicking and fun, and it just keeps going down and down and down and down, and it ends up in a very dark place where I just feel like he couldn't pull himself out of that pit, and I think he didn't want to be in that pit. I'm not sure, but yeah. So that's the story of Amerika.
Well, no, but it's not, because you said there was no ending.
Yeah.
It wasn't finished.
Yeah.
So, but you read it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's published. I mean, it exists, yes.
But so we're not talking Lady and the Tiger. Lack of
no. It's
but,
not. No,
I mean, how does it? If there's no ending, how does it end? And then
it stops mid-sentence. It literally stops mid-sentence. Like there's the sentence that doesn't even complete itself. I wish I brought the copy of the book. I'd read it to you.
We're not talking Monty Python.
No, not quite. No, it's just a word. It's literally it's a sentence that doesn't complete. And in fact, the final chapter, which is a theater chapter, that chapter ends with him getting on a train to go join this theater company, and it just ends with the train going through the mountains, and it talks about how cold the mountains were and how high they were, and God. Now that one may end in a period. I'm not sure, but I think that one also trails off the last sentence of that chapter. I think he literally was at his desk and just went, oh. Screw this. I think I've been there as a writer. Like, you're so frustrated. It's not working. It's not working, and you give up on it.
But you.
Yeah, but he didn't want it published. He wanted it burned. He told Max Brod to burn it. He didn't burn it himself, though. He didn't burn it himself. He kept it. So he liked it enough to do that. But
so does he admit that it wasn't finished, or was it? Do we know that it wasn't intentional?
Oh yeah, for sure we know it wasn't intentional.
Okay, that's that.
Oh yeah. No, he just because Max Brod was, he was quite well respected even when he was living, even when he was struggling. The few things that he had written, people would read them and really love them. I mean, he had a great deal of respect, and Brod was always like, "Give me Amerika, because he let Brod read this stuff. Let me publish it. No, it's terrible. You can't publish it." That was basically where it was at. You can publish the first chapter, but the rest of it's just awful. It's awful, and you can't. And that was pretty much where it was. And then he died, and Brod said, "Okay, I'm going to publish it," and that's basically what went down. So, but Kafka's instruction to Brod was burn this manuscript. I think he was just really frustrated. He felt like he didn't find it. I just feel like he felt like it just didn't pan out. And I've been there. I have a file cabinet full of unrealized projects. You get to that point where it's not working and you cannot figure out the solution. You know there's a solution, but you can't figure it out. And then you move on to other things, and you just never kind of come back to it because your brain, your inspiration is elsewhere, and then you're not particularly interested in that story anymore. So, he went on and wrote The Trial and The Castle and all these other things. I think he sort of evolved beyond this story.
So how did you come up with the ending? Beyond that last word.
It was at first it was really hard because I wanted to be faithful, and I really didn't want to violate his purpose, and I didn't want to make up something that wouldn't. So I wrote a draft, and I kind of folded that theater chapter in, but it was a very tenuous connection. It didn't what I was preaching earlier, didn't have a strong narrative drive, didn't have a motor, it didn't go somewhere. And I realized I had to make it go. There was finally, I have to come up with something.
Sure.
And I did. All I know is I sort of sat and thought, because the book ends where he ends up in this apartment. These two tramps who kind of take him in. They bring him into an apartment as refuge from. He's wanted by the police, and then they trap him there and tell him. He finds out he was brought there in order to become a slave to this strange opera singer woman who lives in the apartment. So he's kind of at a very, very low point there. So I had one of the themes I'd taken that's not really in the book is his obsession with social justice. The main character, Carl Rossman, he's really obsessed with being fair and doing things right, making sure that if he's accusing somebody of something, at one point he accuses somebody of thievery. Well, am I right? Maybe I'm not right. Maybe they didn't do that. Maybe I'm not. He's always really parsed, and he gets himself in trouble because of this. And it's a tendency of my own, and it's also a tendency of Kafka's. He was constantly questioning his own. He always thought of himself as the guilty party. And so it's not really present in this book so much, which is more of an adventure book, but I sort of put that into the character from the beginning. In the beginning of the book, the impetus for the character leaving Prague and coming to Amerika is his parents banished him because he impregnated the family maid. And there was a huge scandal, and they said, get out of the house. And they I mean, it's pretty traumatic. They kicked him out of the house, his father basically, and said, get out of here. And we find out in the book pretty quickly, there's the backstory that essentially he was molested by this maid, who was an older woman in her 30s, and he feels innocent. And that also ties into Kafka's own strange sexual obsessions, but then it's never mentioned again in the book at all. It's like this chapter that you see this sort of horrific event happen to him, and then he never brings it up again. So I decided I really wanted to keep that. I thought, this is a traumatized kid.
Sure.
I wanted to keep that element all the way through, so I invented a character who a woman who resembles the maid who has a child and reminds him of her because he feels guilty abandoning a kid. Even though it's not his fault, his child is back there in Prague that he's left behind. So I wanted to keep that as an element, that he feels that he's done something wrong. And so as it goes along, he constantly does not want to do something wrong. He wants to do things right and give people the benefit of the doubt, and that's what gets him in trouble. So that brings us to the ending. I felt like he'd gotten to a place where he's trapped on a balcony, and I just thought, and there's a scene there's a scene at the very end of the book where they throw him out on the balcony, the two tramps who've caught him, and they told him to be a slave, and he goes on the balcony, and across the way is a student on another balcony. It's almost like his fantasy version of himself, who, because he always wanted to be a student, he wanted to become an engineer, and his father kind of told him you couldn't. I mean, I'm reading between the lines.
Sure.
And he has a long conversation with this student where the student basically tells him, there's no hope for you. You should take this job as a slave. You're never going to find a better job. There's no good job for immigrants. There's no hope for you. So I just thought, logically, he's fallen so low, and I thought that Kafka ran out of steam because that chapter is very long. Like, he realized he'd reached the bottom. I thought he would give up at this point, and I had him throw himself off the balcony. And I had him survive that fall, and then he continues on. And I created a flyer to that theater company to create a connection that he's found earlier. That then he uses and goes to the theater company. And I took one of the tramp characters who, in the course of the book, there's two tramps. One is really kind of the ringleader and kind of mean, and there's another one who's more of a buffoon. They're kind of like the fox and the. What are in Pinocchio, the fox and the what is it, a wolf? I forget. But then it's thought that Kafka took it from that because Collodi wrote that. Pinocchio was written not that long before this. So in any case, there's this one who's a buffoon, and Carl keeps saying to him, "Oh, you're the nice one. You're not bad." And in the book, they're both bad. But I thought I would take that, like, well, he would maybe try to save the one who's not bad, and take him to the theater company, and they would escape, and that's how they would kind of escape after he fell off the balcony. But he's still, at this point, there's a sense of futility. This theater company is, in the book, it's very bureaucratic. It doesn't feel wonderful. There's something about it that seems a little bit of a scam. It's constant, all these bureaucrats interviewing him, and they're going to hire everybody, and then they're going to take them away. So I just decided to make him, he's skeptical, and he's based upon this conversation with the student. He's skeptical. He doesn't really trust where he's going. He accepts it, but he's become to a point where he's lost his naivete and trust, and he feels like he's going to go along with him because he doesn't have a choice. He's a wanted man, and but he's going to go along. And in order to do that, he actually has to abandon the guy he was going to save. He actually has to let the mead guy come and take him away. So to do that, to survive, he ends up doing something which is really, it's the first time in the book he kind of does something that he's not proud of. He turns his back on somebody, because in the rest of the story he defends everybody. He defends a stoker in the beginning. It's a really, I'm sort of talking in circles, but that was how I kind of came to the conclusion of where do I take this. He tries to save people. He tries to do something that's just. He's wised up a little more than he has been in the Red Book, and where does that take him as a person? It's very open ended. I didn't want to be an actual conclusion. He's young. He's still only 17, but he has his attitude to where he's going is much different than it's been prior to that. And he's taken an action in terms of betraying this guy he was going to save, that's going to live with him for the rest of his life, the same way the abandonment of his child does. And then I also had the woman who I'd created, who is a reminder of that maid. She's the one. She actually saves him, and he ends up on the train with her and the baby. So he's sort of now back with the maid and with the baby. So that's kind of where I took it, and I did it a lot by instinct. I wrote that ending in the space of a couple of weeks, and I just went with it. We did a staged reading, and it worked for everybody. So I just kind of went, and I kind of like it. I think it works, but who knows? Maybe Kafka would read it now and go, "What the hell did you do to my book?" I have no idea. And the student scene, which I loved, we ended up removing it from this production. So I've described it, but it's not in this production. We cut it for length, but I love that scene. So
well, let's talk about that. Why cut? What was it? And why from that version? Why do it from one version? Excuse me. Why from one version and then take it out of another? Especially if it's something. And I don't want this to be a kill your darlings. I mean, let me ask you this, because if you cut something and it doesn't affect the story, then you obviously know you made the right decision. So was that the case?
I have to say, I mean, no one's seen it. The play was long. Obviously, it's 3 hours. It was longer.
It's still
obviously,
3 hours and 5 minutes, right?
It's 3 hours and 5 minutes, depending on each act is about a little over 50 minutes, and it's got two 15-minute intermissions. So it's 3 hours and 5 minutes.
Well, I was going to say we'll get into that. Let's just get into that now.
It depends how fast they play it. Sometimes it's 3 hours. I'll put it this way: there was a great deal of concern about the length. There was an enormous amount of concern by the theater, by a lot of people. If I had my druthers, I would leave that scene in there. But I felt at a certain point I have to kind of be a good soldier, and I let it go. And you could pull that scene out, and you could connect the scene that comes before and after without it being evident that it's gone. It was the one scene in the play that you could do. It was not easy to cut any other scenes out. So that was the one I chose to do, and I feel the loss of it when I watch it. I wish it were back in there, but it kind of works without it. I don't know what to tell you. I miss it, but that's what we did. And sometimes you do that. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I did it in television too. I would have to cut things out because obviously in television you have to cut to length.
Yeah, we're looking at 22 minutes if it's a half hour, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so how long is this scene?
5 minutes.
So are you familiar with the song "The Entertainer" by Billy Joel?
Long ago.
Yeah. So basically, he's like, they cut it down to 3:05.
Yeah.
That's the actual lyric, and so
that's hilarious. That's hilarious.
But that's.
Well,
so
you make
3:10 to 3:05.
Nobody held a gun to my head. I made this choice, and I could have stuck to my guns and said no, but I did. So we'll see. We'll see. That's what it's at. You can read the book and read the student scene in the book.
I want to get. I do still want to. I do want to go into this stuff still.
Whenever you're producing anything, there are pressures on you to. And I will say there is an obsession with length. I have to say that I do not share. I love epics. I love long things. I saw Nicholas Nickleby, a production that was 8 hours long in 1982, where there were meal breaks. I saw 10 years ago a production of Dostoevsky's The Devils that Piccolo Teatro did in New York that was 7 hours, again with a meal break. Like, I don't have an issue with long things, but people really, really do. Every review for this show has mentioned its length. Every one.
Of course.
So it's to me, it's something, I will say, even approaching this, I'm so old school, and I'm fine with plays that are 90 minutes and 3 characters. We all know economically why that's the preponderance of that.
I suppose,
but I wanted to make an epic. I wanted to violate all that. I wanted it to have a lot of people. I wanted it to have depth. I wanted it to have breadth. I wanted it to really breathe that way. And it was deliberate on my part. But it's interesting. I haven't been involved in theater since 2007, so it's been a long time, and it was different then. We did a production of The Devils at Open Fist. Dostoevsky, I can't remember the woman who adapted it, Elizabeth, God, I can't remember her last name. It was 3 hours and 15 minutes. Nobody batted an eye, nobody cared. But
Not
it's
back
interesting.
then, of course not.
It's interesting now, and I'm so long away. It was sort of stunning to find out how length is. People are really obsessed with it.
100%.
I don't know what to say. It was a tough decision. It was a really tough decision.
I get, cutting a half of the play to make it a 90-minute thing, because that's what we're doing. We're dealing with short attention span. I mean, that just reminds me, which probably started in the 90s. There was that on Comedy Central, short attention span theater.
Oh, right.
So, but that's where we're at. We're like, ideally, right now, audiences want 90 minutes with no intermission. And it's kind of ridiculous. And it's like, you're mentioning this, it's like, I had to cut 5 minutes. Like, that's like, well, we're going to cut the important scenes out of Hamlet, which is, I think, 4 hours on its own.
People are cutting Hamlet all the time. I mean, everybody who does Hamlet cuts something.
Right.
If I do this play again, I'd probably keep it in. Again, it's a decision you make. It's like movies that have director's cuts. I mean, what can you say?
Sure.
You just kind of, you make a choice, and sometimes it's a choice in the moment. And it may have been the right decision. I don't know if I put that scene back in, and maybe the momentum would be lost, because it's definitely, there's momentum in the end that goes, he's on the run, he's got a, that scene I liked it because suddenly there was this quiet scene, this quiet, slow scene of talking. To me, on an almost musical level, I like that difference in rhythm. That said, the scene that comes before it also has it's a scene in the apartment, and there's a little too much talking in that scene. So it was a difficult choice. I think it's in some ways possibly a work in progress. Possibly the next one you just kind of put it back in and see. It worked when we tried it. I will say it worked without it, but I think it will work better with it. It's a hard choice. It's always, you're making hard choices, and that was the choice I made in that moment.
And you don't think it doesn't objectively? I say this objectively, because obviously it's personal to you. Objectively, does it affect the story to where it really changes something, and you're not going to get the full effects of what you intended to?
I think it affects his attitude in terms of, I think that scene is what makes him give up. I think that scene is what makes him think it's impossible.
Sure.
And I think without that scene, his attitude has to be different. And so I tried to direct the actor in the last scene to be more skeptical and less despairing. That it's more skepticism about this theater company and less despairing about it's hopeless, which might be a better direction to go, because to end something on hopelessness is not necessarily a good dramatic strategy. So I do think it affects what the ending actually is.
Sure.
For better or worse, it's really hard to know. I'm just, it just opened last weekend. This choice was made 2 weeks ago, so it's still raw for me.
Sure.
If you talk to me in a month or 2 months, I'd probably be able to give you a more coherent, a better, a more well thought out. But at this point, I'm not. I can't speak with any definitive take on what I think.
So there's a theater company. That's right. There's a theater company in this particular play, correct?
Yes, the Theater of Oklahoma.
Okay, so then here's suggestion, take it for what it is, that you do a rewrite and include a scene or storyline about how the theater company wants you to remove a scene from the play.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. There you go. A little meta.
Make it exactly.
Yeah. So, I don't know. So, yeah.
So let's delve into this, because, and again, and I we don't have to approach this as I'm not coming into a place that may or may not get you in trouble, but I want to talk about the politics of this aspect of that of the pressure or lack of saying this scene needs to go.
When you're doing a production, when you're doing anything, it's not just you. You know, you're working with a whole bunch of people. You're working with not only producers, but you're working with actors. You're working with, I mean, everybody has an interest in, and people are generally worried. Like, is it too long? Is it going to mean we're not going to get audiences? Is it going to make I mean, there's a genuine worry, and I do feel like it's a communal endeavor. I could stick to my guns and say, I'm going to do this, come hell or high water. I'm the artist. But in the end, you're working with people. It's a group, and I used to run that group. You know, I used to be one of the people around the company. Yeah. I think that's just part of. I think it's part of being a decent human being. I just think you have to work with other people and what their concerns are. I think there was definitely a fear that this would keep us from getting, people wouldn't want to come to the show, we'd get bad reviews, et cetera, et cetera. I think that was, and it's a genuine fear. There was no, I didn't feel it the way you do in the movies where, you know, in a studio where it's just sort of these calculated studio executives. I felt these were genuine people with genuine concerns. I like them all and respect them all. They're all artists. Like, there's no, and again, no one, it was my choice, but I thought in the end I should play ball.
Sure, but 310 to 305, are we really?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about this forever. That was a choice that was made. Maybe it was 6 minutes. I don't know. There you go.
Okay, so I'm going to throw this out, and this is not a jab. I don't know what your future endeavors are going to be in the realm of playwriting. This is where I address the audience. Like, we've talked about this in the past. So there's something in the guild called the Playwrights Bill of Rights.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So, you know.
Yeah, but I said yes. If I said no, then it wouldn't have happened. It's my choice. I made the choice.
The show wouldn't have happened?
No, it would have happened. Oh, no. The show would have happened.
Okay.
I made the choice. There was no, if you don't cut this scene, we won't do the show.
Understood. Okay.
This was just fear, and it was trying to cut it down and to cut, you know, I could trim little lines here and there, but, you know, I know that from there's a point when trimming lines isn't going to get you. You need to cut a scene. Right. You need to cut a chunk out, and that was really the only chunk that could go. I trimmed from the beginning. I made trims. I probably cut about 15, 20 minutes out of this in the process from the beginning of rehearsals to from the stage reading version, which we did 2 years ago. I was constantly, you know, I was aware that you want to get rid of the fat. You definitely want to get rid of the fat, and it became apparent where the fat was. But I think there was a desire to get it down to 3 hours, and basically what happened is we got it to 3 hours. That's why I'm saying when I'm saying 3 hours and 5 minutes, I think that was just one night played a little long. Right. We got it down to 3 hours when we were in the runs phase. So it was 3 hours. It was, the goal was to get it down to 3 hours. That was what it was.
Has the length affected draw in this environment?
I can't say it's been open 1 week. I will say this: it's really fast moving. I mean, I was my concern as a director and as a writer. It's written very cinematically. There's no like blackouts and lights down and changing the set. Okay. It is like one scene goes right in the next. It morphs. I mean, it's just the lights and the sound just change, and now you're in a different location. It is. There's one little sequence in the beginning which is almost like a montage where there'll be a blackout, but the lights will fade in almost immediately. It's almost like a sketch, like a series of 8 scenes, brief. But the rest of the play, there's no blackouts. It just moves. It moves. The scenes are short. I mean, I was very concerned from the very beginning, like, I want pace in this thing. I don't want to bore people. Okay. I don't want to waste their time. It's the way I write television and all of that stuff. I want to keep the damn thing moving.
Sure, okay.
So it moves. And I will say, everyone who's seen it says it flies by. That's what I've been told. And that people say, God, when the intermission came, it brought me up short. It was like already we're at intermission. It moves. So to me, when I watch it, it doesn't feel like 3 hours. And the people I've talked to say it doesn't feel like 3 hours. So they feel it. I'm told it doesn't feel long. Now, those are only the people I've talked to.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, and even the reviews that I've read, of which there's only been a handful, say this really moves. It's really fun. It goes, you know, it moves. But it's too long because it's 3 hours. But they don't say where it's too long. They just say, well, it's 3 hours, so that's too long. But it's fun and it moves. I can't tell you whether it affects draw, but I will say this. I can say it objectively. It's a fun show. The designers are great. The sound design. I mean, it's just got so many bells and whistles. It's very enjoyable on that. And I'm not a person who brags, so believe me, this is a genuine opinion. So
I'm assuming that, and whose choice was it? Was it written to flow like that?
Yeah.
It was intentionally.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so
yeah.
it wasn't the director's thing. It was like, this is how I'm going to approach it because I know this is long, but I'm gonna push through.
No, as a writer and as a story editor, I was that way. I'm very concerned with nothing, with no scene overstaying its welcome, with something moving. And one of the instincts you get as a writer, at least I get, is which may not pertain to this particular play, is that sense of when you need a reversal. And
Sure.
it's almost instinctive. It's when you need to change it, when you need to change the story to keep that story moving. And I can't tell you in any scientific way what that is, but you just sense it. The other writers
That's what I was going to ask, Mike. How do you know?
you just go, I need to change here. It needs to change. I feel like this beat has played itself out and it needs to change, and I cannot tell you what that is, but I when I was a film editor, it's the same thing when you're a film editor, which I did in the early 80s. You just kind of know. You just run that thing and then you go, boom, it's there. That's where the cut is. I can't tell you why you're choosing that moment, but you just feel it. And as a writer, and I think that's a lot of writing, like any art, is instinctive. I can't tell you where it came from. I didn't learn it from a book or from anything. It just, that's something I trust. And so when I was writing this play, I just could feel like, needs to change now. Now it needs to change. And there was still fat in it when we put in, so there was still some fat, but still there was just that sense of, okay, now, and I was just very aware as a writer, because I'd been a director as well. You know, when I was in Open Fist, I was an actor, I directed plays, I did all of that. So I approached it when I was writing as a director, because my intention was always to direct it.
Sure.
In fact, that's the reason I wrote it. And it was always like, how am I going to stage this? How am I going to stage this moment? You know, because it's got a lot of big scenes. It's got a lot of big, you know, it's not in a drawing room. I mean, it's like, we're here, we're there, we're here. How do we get from this place to that place? Well, you know, you got to figure that out on the page. At least I did.
So that instinct of knowing it's too long, because doing playwriting workshops and working with emerging playwrights or beginning amateur playwrights, can that instinct be taught? Like, when do you acquire that skill?
I cannot tell you. I mean, I know for myself, I would say I learned writing much more from watching a lot of plays, reading a lot of books, watching a lot of movies, just sort of seeing what worked and what didn't. I went to USC back in the late 70s, the film school, and I think it's evolved a lot since then, but their writing teachers back then were not the strongest, and I can't say that I learned anything from, in fact, I remember they would just kind of lecture you and you weren't learning by doing. All my writing skills I've learned just by doing it, and just mistakes you make and you go, oh, okay, I shouldn't do that. It's instinctive. I think a lot of art isn't. It's like when I became I didn't become an actor until I was 40. It was because I was frustrated in TV, and I decided to do this, and I took an acting class. I was terrified to take it because I thought, well, I'll be terrible, and then I found I had a facility for it. And what I learned was, in some weird way, either you can do it or you can't. You know, you can learn intention, you can learn all those skills, but there is a certain level at which either you have the ability to just get up there and be unself-conscious and become another person and not worry, or you cannot do it. And that is instinct, and I don't know how you measure that or tell that to people. I mean, obviously training makes a huge difference, and there are people who started clumsily and they get there. But for me, in my life, it's all been sort of observation, seeing a lot of it, using my brain to figure it out, and then just sort of instinct. Instinct. I don't know. Yeah. It's
Sure.
I can't. I have no magic formula. I have none. So, but I will say to anybody, if you want to do anything, watch a lot, read a lot. If you want to be a playwright, read a lot of plays, go to a lot of plays. If you want to make movies, go to a lot of movies. If you want to write a novel, read a lot of novels. I think sometimes people approach something without really having much experience in it. And so I just, you learn so much just by taking all that in, and it's fun. It's fun to read and watch all this stuff.
It is, and I want to give the flip side of that, because I that's the advice that I was given as well. When I first started writing, I have a screenplay I've been working on since 98 or 99, you know, as we do. Uh-huh. And the thing I was told is, like, go read screenplays. And I've got my bottom shelf is, Cider House Rules and Seven and a bunch of stuff, and it's like that's fine and dandy, but it didn't help. And it wasn't until I started. And again, sorry guys, this is a story we've come across in multiple episodes. It wasn't until I became a guest reader for Harvard Westlake.
Okay.
And I started reading plays, and then when I started producing, I do a film noir styled one-act festival.
Okay.
And so it wasn't until I started reading the bad stuff that made me realize what made the good stuff great.
Oh, that's interesting.
So you can read all you want, but I don't know what to look for. I don't know what to recognize. And it's not until you read the bad stuff, it's like, oh, now I know why this is good. So I don't...
There's truth in that. And I have to say, seeing a lot of movies, you see bad movies and you go, well, that doesn't work.
Sure.
But this one works. Why does this one work? Oh, I see. It works because of that. That didn't work because of that. For sure. That is part of it, for sure. Seeing things that don't work, you try to figure out why didn't that work.
So I don't know if that becomes like watch a lot of bad movies. Like go rent The Room.
I've never seen that movie, but I've heard of it.
You'll learn a lot.
I don't know what to say. I mean, again, it wasn't hard for me because I would go and see, when I was young, I would go to festivals of some, when there was, what was the festival? Filmex. I would see everything. I would go to all the movies that it was at Century City. I would see everything. And when I loved theater, when I would go to New York, I'd just see as many places. I'd be at that TKTS booth, like every performance. I mean, I was a massive reader of books. I just really liked taking all that stuff in. So, and of course you're going to take in bad stuff as well as good stuff. So you're probably right. Yeah. You're definitely right that it's, but I think it's a combination because I think then reading the bad stuff, you can also see why the good stuff works. You have a better knowledge of why that works.
Yeah. So, and which I'm going to go back. We're going to backtrack. There's going to be a lot of backtracking, by the way, because it was a note that I took in this is that we're going back to your time when you started at Open Fist, that LA theater at the time had a really bad rap. It was terrible. Open Fist maybe not so much, but there was a lot of it.
I mean, there was so much. There were like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of theaters, and it was like you would have to wade through. I mean, you had to be choosy if you wanted to find something good, but there were good theater companies.
Sure, 100%, yeah.
I would say there was, like 24 pretty good, and you could trust them for the most part. And they would do. I mean, we did some bad stuff, Open Fist, I would for sure, unquestionably. But in general, you could trust that you were going to get something that, Circle X or Antius or Echo now is really great, and they existed then. And my mind is I'm so old, my memory is bad. I'm not coming up with the theater companies back then. Oh, the one Furious Theater was in Pasadena. There were ones you could trust. You knew they were Actors Gang. They existed, and so there were those. And in fact, I remember we were always what's it called? Place 7. A bunch of us theater companies kind of worked together to try and promote each other. Oh, so you could do that. Yeah. But yes, then there were all the showcase theaters. There were there were like thousands of them, quite literally. I remember the LA Times would just have like massive listings, or LA Weekly, of just endless. You're right. There was a lot of bad theater, but there was good theater. You could find it for sure.
I think it's come around. I think it's gotten a much better. I mean, just myself doing this for the last 4 years it opened me up to a lot of theater that I didn't know was out there. And I can't say that I've seen anything that was like, wow. That, not when I say wow, like that was terrible. Like everything that I've seen and the playwrights that have been sent my way have like, there are aspects of playwriting that I don't agree with, like for instance personification. Like I do not that's one of my most biggest pet peeves is personification. And I
don't know what that is. What is personification?
Inanimate objects or animals or insects or whatever being played by actors.
Oh, okay.
And Bernardo, I'm so sorry. I'm forgetting your last name because I have a friend of mine's last name in my head. But Bernardo wrote a play called Crabs in a Bucket. And so when he sat in that chair, and I'm like, please tell me you don't have actors playing crabs. And he's like, absolutely, I do. I'm like, I can't. I just can't. And sure enough, I went, and it was so good. But
There you go.
I've seen some terrible things. I've seen people playing haunted, like a house that was haunted.
Yeah.
And it's a lady who moves into her new home, and and I'm like, no.
I'll tell you this: in my book, there are no rules, and anything can work. Anything can work if you use enough imagination and you bring enough skill to do it. I always felt, in television, I was pitched they would want me to develop shows from an idea that like some executive would have. And I have to tell you, there were some terrible ones, and I'd always say, you know what? I can make something out of this. And I would come up with something that I kind of liked. Now, often what would happen is then that exec would say, that wasn't what I thought it would be, and then you kill it. But to me, my thinking was always, there are no rules. You just, you can break any rule and make something. I mean, that's one of the reasons I love John Guare. That guy's a rule breaker. None of those plays have a real conventional structure. I directed a play, Lighty Breeze, of his, which the play kind of ends, and then a character shows up in the last 10 minutes, like out of the blue with a new issue. It's like, and it works. For me, it works. So that's why I always objected to screenwriting books and all those that sort of made rules, like you need this, you need this at the end of Act 1, and you need this at the end of Act 2, because to me, one of the fun things of writing, as much as I say I structured and all of that, is that there's no rules. Like, I don't know what it's always an open landscape. That's how you discover, So yeah, but I have the same things you do. There's things I don't like you're saying personification. Yeah. But again, I've seen them where the same as you, where I go, oh, they made that work. There's something I don't like, and it works.
Yeah, no, and again, and I'm assuming you are indeed talking about stage and not necessarily animation. Of course, it's going to work.
No, it's not. No, the animation follows the same story rules as anything else. You're still telling a story.
But in animation, I can buy a talking baby and a dog that drinks martinis.
Right, but why can't you buy that on stage if the person embodies that and does it right and acts it right and makes it clever in a way that, why not?
Because I think it's execution, to be honest with you. That's probably what it is to me.
You just have to make it work. If it's badly done, then it's badly done. But I don't think the concept in and of itself is necessarily wrong. I don't know. To me, I really believe in you make it work. It either works or doesn't work. But no idea is necessarily a bad idea until you've except by the way as you said, execution.
How we kind of touched on it, but I really kind of wanted to just delve into a little bit more, and that's being a story editor. How did that help your playwriting? And what advice can you give coming from that POV?
Well, I came at it after, again, I started as a film editor, then I was a screenwriter, all unproduced screenplays, by the way, and then I became a story editor. But I'd already done, editing, you learn so much about writing and storytelling.
Sure.
Hugely. And then writing my own scripts had figured that out. So I came at story editing already having a sort of sense of structure. What's good structure?
What is good structure?
As I said, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And
is it that simple? Is it really honestly that simple?
Yeah, it kind of is. It kind of is. It kind of is.
But you're not applying, because again, we touched on it, there are rules, and you yourself don't abide by, and again, sorry, we brought this up in multiple episodes. You don't necessarily abide by the Save the Cat rules.
I don't know what the Save the Cat rules is.
Blake Snyder, he wrote a book called Save the Cat, and it's really just kind of like, if you want a successful, marketable movie, by page 5, you have to have established this by page, that okay. Kind of like it's very, and if you abide by this, whatever your story is gonna sell.
All you have to do is hold people's interests. That's why I don't believe in rules. I don't believe that by page 5 you have to save the cat or whatever it is. You have to hold people's interest. And that's why I'm talking about instinct and reversals. That's you go, because I've obviously in television, when I was writing the scripts, I would get particularly in, they're about 20-page scripts for, because I was writing 11.5-minute
Right.
pieces. They're about 20-page. You would get to page 8 or 9 and you'd realize, or you'd get to page 12 and you'd realize, that should be page 5, page 6. I need to cut. I need to kind of reduce. And so there's that instinct. But I can't tell you there was a rule. Every script is different in a different story, but I would have the instinct at page 12, I'm not going to get, this script's going to be 30 pages. If I have this event happen on page 12, I have to have this happen on page 6 or so.
How do you know that?
You just develop that instinct for what, because you know kind of what you do in your head, have a sense of, I don't want to say 3-act structure, because again, I don't adhere to any rules, but you do have that sense of, okay, I've set up the premise, but I haven't developed it yet. So I'm at page 12 and I haven't started the development of the story yet, really. All I've done is set up all I've done is done the setup. I need to make the setup here, shorter so that I can do the development in this section. I need enough time to develop it, and so that I have enough time then to resolve it. So I think it's that instinct. I mean, because there definitely is a set up your premise, develop it, resolve it. I mean, there is kind of that structure for just about anything, although there ones it probably aren't. But that in general, yeah, and that again is, for me, it's instinct. It's just I just know it needs to, I need to do it here then. But I would never write a book and say this has to happen on page 5 or this has to happen on page 10.
So can those instincts be taught?
Again, my way of learning it was by watching a whole lot of stuff and then doing, and that was my way of learning. And I have to tell you, I didn't learn anything in a writing class, not one. I took 2 screenwriting. I failed screenwriting in USC because I so hated the teacher in the class that I didn't write. I didn't turn in a project, and so then I had to take it again. And then I didn't like that teacher either. And I did turn in something, but it was 40 pages. And at that point, again, I was no rules. I was groping my way through it. I had no instinct, and it was not very good. I think I barely passed. I got good grades, and I was like a good student. The only thing I did badly, I was screenwriting. I learned it after. I have to say, I just learned by doing it. But my student films were good, and those were written. But I don't know what to say. I just kind of kept trying, and I kept doing, and you kept learning while you're doing. You learn when you're making the film. Oh, this doesn't work. I'll cut that out. You just learn by doing and watching and watching and watching. And I really can't repeat enough how much you really need to watch. Watch a lot. Turn on TCM and just leave that damn channel on 24 hours a day.
Okay. Well, no, I mean, don't even get me started, because I will tell you that, and I want a comparison from you, but I will tell you that I came to the realization how much Casablanca pisses me off.
Oh, wow. Why is that?
Because it's so freaking brilliant. The
There
writing
you go.
does
Okay.
not get any better. I mean,
yeah.
it's just, you sit there and watch it, and it's just it's,
Yeah.
it's just all of that. The whole scene at the bar at Rick's Cafe when the Germans and the Nazis come in and they start interrogating him. Just how much is layered there that says so much without saying nothing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So is there a movie that when you say you got to watch stuff, is there something that you can pinpoint? I'm putting you on the spot, so forgive me. That is this is for instance, Casablanca. This is a prime example of what you can learn so much from this movie. And then can you give an opposite to where it's if you watch this and then watch this?
I have a hard time with that, because then it's like picking out something that's your favorite movie. back in school, they were always saying Chinatown has the most perfect structure.
Yeah.
And it really does. It's beautifully structured. And then when you read the book about the bank, Robert Town was just struggling. And in fact, his reputation was for not having good structure. It was a big, giant, unwieldy thing. And then Roman Polanski kind of put it all together in a hotel room over 3 weeks and structured it properly. So, who knows how, and it is beautifully structured. I don't know, but I would hesitate to say anything as a model that you should imitate. I had a friend long ago. He was in school. He wrote a computer program about writing, and I think was it Alien that they used as a model? I can't remember. This is back in the 80s. And I remember at the time saying, how can you use one movie as your model? But he did. I don't know. I would say take a movie that you really love that works for you. It really works, and then look at it and wonder why does that work?
Okay.
Why does that work? Because I hesitate to prescribe any particular film as somehow the epitome of whatever.
Sure.
But that one's good. I mean, I will say Chinatown is really beautifully structured for sure.
Sure. You touched on something. You said that in regards to Amerika. Real quick, just out of curiosity, is the title of the book the same? Is it Amerika or The Man Who...
No. When he was writing it, Kafka, it was called Der Verschollen, which is a German word meaning the missing person, like in a police report, like the missing person.
Okay.
So when Max Brod published it, he gave it the title Amerika, I think, to make it probably sound more appealing. The missing person, I think, just means because Carl has left Europe. But it's interesting. It's a police report term. It's just it's a weird title for this story.
Right. That's what I'm curious.
Which really, I think he modeled it after David Copperfield. So you think, well, why isn't it called The Adventures of Carl Rossman or whatever? But that's what he called it. Then, so Max Brod called it Amerika. Later, when people did further translations and people want to be more faithful and so forth, they called it The Man Who Disappeared, because the missing person is kind of a clunky English. They sort of anglicized The Man Who Disappeared. I knew I wanted both titles because we think of it as Amerika.
Sure.
That's what we think of the book as, but that's not what Kafka called it. And I like both titles.
Okay.
So, and I love war titles. I actually love. I wrote in I think one of the interviews I did that I really like. I wanted this. I love things that are handmade, and I wanted this production to seem handmade.
Right.
There's animation in it, but it's hand drawn, almost like very black and white animation. There's no projections. There's a few little projections, but the actual backdrops are painted, are painted and physical, because I wanted everything. I wanted to avoid what we now have is really theater that has a lot of technology.
Sure, yeah.
I wanted to avoid that, so I wanted it to be handmade. So I also liked that title, Amerika or The Man Who Disappeared. I don't know. It seems like somebody hammered it together, right, with nail that's like barely attached. And I love the graphic designer for the poster. He ended up doing Amerika, and then he did The Man Who Disappeared falling over the edge of it, which is just such a lovely way to do that.
You mentioned earlier that you had intended to direct this.
Yeah.
And did you direct it?
Yeah.
Oh, you wrote and directed this?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Because I wanted to know, because in my head, I'm like, oh, he intended to, but he didn't. And then I was going to ask what changed. But obviously that doesn't come into play.
No,
that question does not.
That's why I didn't do it way back when, because I wanted to do, when I became a literary manager, I wanted to do a Faulkner adaptation. I wanted to do Amerika. And Faulkner adaptation, we had Stefan Novinsky directed it. We found an adaptation, and I put that whole package together. But that was someone else directing it. I knew Amerika because it was very personal to me.
Sure.
I knew this one I have to direct. So, yeah.
You also mentioned earlier that this story is short.
It's like 200 pages. I mean, for a novel, it's short.
Yeah, right. Okay. So what makes exactly my question? What makes a short story? Well, a 3 hour and 5 minute.
Well, most books. I mean, the optimum book for like a movie is probably a 90-page book. I mean,
sure.
Because you embellish things and things get long. What made it that I can't explain? I just wrote it, and it ended up being 150 something pages on or whatever. The first draft was like 170, I don't know. And then you cut it down, and then you just put it on its feet, and you listen, and you go, okay, that works. And I don't know. That's what it ended up being. I just went logically through, this scene needs this much time, this scene needs that much time, this scene needs that. I'm sure I could cut those scenes down. One of the things I do want, though, is what I really loved about the book was what I really loved about the book was that it was funny, and I wanted to preserve that comic spirit, and so I feel that the scenes are written to fully. The length of the scene is to embrace that comedy that powers that scene, and comedy requires it. I'm not going to give it a rule here. There's just a certain color to the dialogue that you need to retain. Like if you strip the dialogue down to just the information, then you can make it shorter. Then you could just die. But then you lose the texture and you lose the humor of it. It just becomes now this happens, now that happens. Whereas he meets in the beginning, he meets this uncle, this rich uncle who's this totally narcissistic guy who's going to improve his life, but is really just wrecking it. And it's funny. It's just, to me, it's very funny, and it's almost a lot of that is straight from the book. I just wanted to retain what's so funny about the way this guy talks. And I will say this one thing for Kafka, which I like, and what's humorous is, and I think because he was a lawyer, there's a lot of sort of legalese in the way people talk. Like when people are prosecuting him or whatever, they have a long tortured logic for how they reach it. Well, you did this because of that, and because of that, and because of this, because of this, you're guilty. And to me, that's the funny of that, is that ridiculous logic. And so if you cut the paragraph down and just say you're guilty, well, now you have a short piece, but the meaning's gone. So yeah, I made it as long as it felt to me it needed to be. I have to say, when I watch it doesn't feel long to me. And again, it's 3 acts. If people are in pain, they can leave it the first intermission or the second intermission. That's why I made it 3 acts as well, because I wanted people to never feel imprisoned in their seat. Like I didn't want them to feel like I've been stuck in the seat for 2 hours. I got to get up.
You mean like the trial? Don't leave if you go see this play. You were when we were talking about structure, you mentioned reversals. What is that, and how do you apply that, or rather, when is it time?
The situation changes for the character, the main character, or whoever. The situation changes.
Okay.
And you call it a reversal because often it seems like it's flipping, it's going, the opposite. But something changes in the situation, which now changes the story, changes what he has to do or she has to do. It's something in the circumstances change that require a change in how the character is going to approach it, or and I think I've always called it a reversal, and my writing partner called it. I think it's actually a term. I don't quote me on that. If it's not a term in a film writing book, I don't know. But I've just always thought of them as reversals, which is basically it's a new beat. It's just a new story beat. It's like now we need a change, and now something new is switching things up.
Okay. Just going back into your history, and because your background, what made you dive into acting, and then which I'm assuming later led into playwriting?
I grew up in Hilo, Hawaii, which is a small town on the Big Island of Hawaii. Like, it's 30,000 people, and that was the biggest town on the island. And there was no theater there. And I somehow glimpsed theater on the Tony Awards or something, and I became obsessed with theater, and I would go to the library and read plays, but there was no way to see it. And I'd like the idea of acting, seemed neat, but I went to this little private Catholic school, and there was no theater there. They disapproved of it, so I really didn't have any avenues for it. Then I went to college. I got into film school, and I decided I would go do that because I didn't. But it was always, I loved theater, and a part of me always wished, like I think anybody has that acting thing, like, God, I would love to do that at some point.
100%.
But, you'd bury it because they never did it. And then I was a writer and all these things. I was cerebral. And but what happened was in the 90s, I was developing television shows. I was gonna direct the actors in the record, and I thought, well, I should take an acting class so I know how to direct them. And so I took this extension class at UCLA. But simultaneously with that, almost in those 2 years, I was getting very, very frustrated with television. The shows I was developing, all of them were hitting a wall. And I just got so frustrated. And then I continued because I found I had a facility for it. I continued on with that. Teacher had her own her own private class. I continued on with that. Then I decided I wanted to learn Shakespeare, so I went to Noise Within and took classes. I went to Theatricum over a couple years. And so when I reached this point in television where I went, I can't stand developing another show where the executive suddenly turns the tables on me. I just decided to. I mean, I had a kind of meltdown. I went, I'm going to run away with the circus, and I literally decided I'm only going to be a freelance writer now for television. I'm not going to be a person in charge of developing shows, and I'm going to find a theater company in town. I'm going to join the theater company because now I know I can act, and and that's what I did. And I just looked in backstage or whatever, whatever auditions, and Open Fist happened to be the one that I went to 2, and they took me in. They were like the second one I auditioned for, and that's how it happened. And oddly enough, it was. I was always frustrated in television, and I ended up in animation, not by design, but just because that was the avenue. I knew people in it, and that's how it has a lot of times you get a job, you're offered the job. I loved being in this theater company for those many years, and it's volunteer. Right now, I'm just working. I'm doing freelance writing and also some day jobs to do it. I was just very happy being an actor in people's plays, programming plays. The whole communal life to me, again, running over the circus was to me what I really loved it. And I was lucky because I came in at a point when they needed sort of a literary manager and a leadership position that I could kind of use my own personal vision to kind of shape what we did. So I had a huge influence on and so I really loved that. So I forget what your question was, but that's my evolution for how I became an actor.
Yeah. No, exactly. You answered it. And so, but I have friends that have said, "Oh, I've always wanted to do this," and it's like, it's not too late. You know what I mean? So, but do you think it takes being, not to say that this is what it took for you? I'm going to use the phrase "backed into a corner." Do you think that's what it takes to finally take that leap that you just? What do you think? Well, I mean,
It may, because I really did. I mean, again, I took the first class because I really was. I was going to be. I was doing a show. I was going to be directing the actors in the record session. So I really did want to have that vocabulary. And I also had I had a friend. I will say this. I had a really, really, really good friend at the time, who she had come from a theater family and was an actor and was doing some play down in San Diego. And she would tell me about it. And I must admit, it sounded so much more fun than this horrible show. The show I was developing was so awful, and that contributed to it. So I was having that input of how fun acting seemed. But yeah, on some level, I did have to hit a wall. I think if I hadn't had this kind of if I wasn't on this specific show, which was terrible, and had this meltdown, I don't know that I would have gone and done theater. I think I may have just stayed on the television trajectory. But that really did make me think I've got to change things up, and I've always wanted to do this. So, hey, what the hell,
Do you think it's ever too late?
No, I actually don't. No. I mean, literally, I was 40 years old. That's pretty, at the time, and what you think when you're 40, you think it's over, right? Yeah. You think it's over. I mean, I'm 67 now, and it's still not over. I mean, it's never over. It's, no, you could do it at 50. You could do it at, I mean, it was kind of amazing, really. And the great thing in doing it at 40 is I think if you're really young as an actor, you're so unformed and you don't have a lot of life experience. When I came in at 40, I had so much to draw on already.
Sure.
That and I find in general a lot of actors I see in movies who, they become movie stars in their 20s, and we all think, oh, they're beautiful and they're okay, but they sort of acquire depth and, in their 40s, then they have a lot of depth, and I just find they're a lot better actors.
Sure.
But no, I don't think it's ever too late. Aren't there I mean, God, I think John Mahoney, who's dead now, but I think he came at acting at like 40 or something. Right, I think there are actors who've come in at 60 or 70.
Right.
Do what you want to do. Again, there's no rules. There are no rules. There's only your fear. And believe me, I have tons of fear. It was that first acting class. Like, I remember going to the door and thinking, I'll be terrible. And I turned around and walked all the way back to the stairway. And then I got to the stairway and went, hey, you coward, you've got to go back in there. And then I went and walked back in. But it was really, really terrifying. But it was interesting. The fear lifted almost immediately.
I'll be applying some of that fear to this episode in a few minutes. But first thing I want to know is, now that you've adapted Amerika, what are you working on right now? Are you going to continue with playwriting?
Maybe. I mean, I'll continue writing. I don't know if I'll write a play or if I'll write a story or if I'll write a. I like writing movies because I really understand that vernacular. At this point, nothing I wrote would get made because of my sensibility is so not in touch. Sure. But maybe I would do that I did that over the pandemic. I wrote a screenplay, and I knew it wouldn't go anywhere. I just love the form.
Why not?
So, yeah, maybe a play. I'm not sure. I'll just keep. But I don't have any. Do I have anything that I've got planned at the moment? No, I am exhausted from this process. I have been working on this play for a year or more. It has been extremely arduous. So I'm just resting right now.
Outside of Amerika or The Man Who Disappeared, playing at the Echo Theater Company in Los Angeles, California.
No, Open Fist.
Open Fist. Oh,
No.
What did I say?
Because I mentioned Echo. They're in the same theater complex.
That's right.
Echo.
I'm so
It's
sorry.
Open Fist.
Yeah, they're in
No.
the same. Yeah. Anyways, it's Atwater Village. There's going to be a ticket link down below, so make sure you go see it. Outside of that, where can people find your work?
Oh my God! See, this is why I didn't want to do this. There's really not, television, the television animation. Honestly, it's not. I don't have tons of stuff out there. See, they shouldn't listen
Doug,
to me.
Arthur,
I should
Martha
listen to me.
Speaks, Curious George.
There you
I
go.
think you guys can know.
There you go. And a whole lot of plays I did 20 years ago that are now, in the ether. So.
And finally, are you on the socials?
No.
Good for you.
No.
So.
There's no way anybody can contact me ever at all. Oh, sorry.
You're good. So this is where I slightly throw you under the bus.
Uh-oh.
Because you were so worried about coming on here and talk about playwriting, which it was supposed to be
one play.
Exactly. And we uncovered so much that we are much longer than we anticipated.
Oh my God. How long have we? 90 minutes. We did 90 minutes.
Yeah.
There you go.
So.
Okay. Hooray! Goal reached.
Don't underestimate yourself. Please don't. There's so much in this episode that I hope that my listeners will take away, because this was insightful as well. It just, every episode has something that that people can take something away with, and I learned so much from you. So.
Oh, great! I'm glad. Okay, good. It was fun, actually. I was dreading it, but it was fun.
there you go. So, Dietrich Smith, thanks for coming on this episode of Playwright Spotlight.
Thank you, James.
Thank you for coming. I don't know why I'm thanking you guys. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Again, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share the show with your friends. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. And in the meantime, until we see each other again, keep writing.